Meghan also doesn't seem to remember when she was apparently pregnant. Lockdown happened March the 15th, 2020. Lily was born June the 4th. But listen to Meghan completely get those dates wrong.
Archie was so little, and I had just gotten pregnant with Lily around that same time.
What if the story you've been told is a lie? Not a big dramatic lie, but a small one. A single sentence uttered so casually you might have missed it. But this one sentence could unravel everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle. It's a story about memory, narrative, and what happens when the dates just don't add up. It's a story that begins with a simple quote, but it spirals into a world of rewritten histories, borrowed identities, and a public persona so carefully constructed that a single crack threatens to bring the whole thing down. This isn't just about a slip of the tongue. This is about the story a woman tells the world about herself, and what happens when that story starts to fall apart, live, for everyone to see. It happened on her own podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder. In a moment of reflection, Meghan Markle offered what seemed like a candid glimpse into her life as a mother. She said, "People forget that Lily is 3 and Archie is 5. So you look at the past 5-6 years of my life, it's yes, with being pregnant, or with a newborn, or with a toddler, and then another one. It sounds relatable, a simple statement about the whirlwind of early motherhood. But there's a problem. The dates are all wrong. Let's look at the facts, the ones that aren't open to interpretation. Prince Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor was born on May 6, 2019. Princess Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor was born on June 4, 2021. The time between Archie's birth and Lilibet's birth is not a few months or even a year. It's 2 years and 1 month. The period she describes as a continuous blur of pregnancy, newborns, and toddlers simply didn't happen that way. There was a distinct 2-year gap where she was not pregnant, not with a newborn, and for a time not even with a toddler in the strictest sense. This isn't just a minor mistake, it's what could be called a narrative compression. It's the act of squeezing a timeline to create a more emotionally potent story. The story of being relentlessly in the trenches with babies for 6 straight years is far more powerful, far more sympathetic than the reality of having 2 children a couple of years apart. It serves a specific purpose to frame her entire post-royal journey as an unbroken period of intense maternal sacrifice. This narrative helps generate sympathy and perhaps even justify the professional setbacks and pivots she's faced since leaving the UK. It's a story designed for maximum impact, not factual accuracy. This connects directly to a sentiment she shared back in 2019, shortly after Archie was born. She spoke about how vulnerable a woman is when pregnant or with a newborn, and how that period was made really challenging for her. By compressing her timeline on the podcast, she retroactively applies that same feeling of intense vulnerability to the entire 6-year period. It's a subtle but powerful rewriting of her own history. But if she can't get the dates of her own children's lives right, what else is she getting wrong? It turns out this is just the tip of the iceberg. The pattern of rewriting history isn't just confined to her personal life, it bleeds directly into her professional ventures. The chaotic saga of her lifestyle brand is a perfect case study. It began with the highly publicized, aesthetically perfect launch of American Riviera Orchard. The name was presented as deeply personal, a romantic nod to the Santa Barbara neighborhood she calls home. The branding was immaculate, the Instagram launch was flawless, and the world was told this was the authentic culmination of her passions. But behind the scenes, the story was very different. The brand was in trouble before it even truly began. Her trademark application for the name was rejected in August 2024, and the reasons were damning for any serious business venture. She was told she couldn't have exclusive rights to the name American Rivieras because it's a common geographical term, a nickname for Santa Barbara. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office also flagged her product descriptions as messy and confusing, fitting into multiple categories. To make matters worse, another Santa Barbara company was already using the name, and the major gourmet food brand Harry & David filed a letter of protest, claiming her brand was too similar to their long-established Royal Riviera line of fruits. Faced with these legal hurdles, the brand abruptly pivoted. American Riviera Orchard vanished, and in its place came As Ever. One royal commentator described the move not as a strategic rebrand, but as a panic launch and a crisis pivot after the original plan fell apart. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Instead of acknowledging the business misstep, Meghan took to her podcast to rewrite the narrative entirely. She dismissed her own carefully chosen, deeply personal brand name as a word salad that she didn't love that so much. This is a classic psychological maneuver. When faced with the uncomfortable conflict between two ideas, I am a savvy businesswoman and I made a very public, embarrassing business mistake. It's easier to change the past than to accept the failure. By claiming she never really liked the name anyway, she resolves that internal conflict. The failure is no longer her own. It's the fault of a name that was never right to begin with. This protects her self-image as a person in complete control. But it also reveals a troubling pattern, a tendency to externalize failure rather than learn from it. It's the same pattern we saw with the timeline. It's easier to bend the story to fit the desired narrative than to admit a simple human error. But what happens when it's not just your own story you're bending, but someone else's? The questions about Meghan's narrative don't stop with her own life and business. A more complex and unsettling pattern emerges when you listen closely to the stories she tells about her values and philosophies, because they often sound strikingly similar to the stories of another incredibly powerful woman, Mellody Hobson. For those who don't know, Mellody Hobson is a titan of the business world. She is the co-CEO of Ariel Investments, the chairperson of Starbucks, and a nationally recognized voice on financial literacy. Her story is one of pure, hard-won success. Raised by a single mother who often struggled to make ends meet, Hobson's ambition was forged in a childhood marked by financial insecurity. Her philosophy is not theoretical, it's rooted in the authentic lived experience of overcoming adversity. Now, listen to the narrative Meghan has built for herself. She too has spoken about the importance of financial literacy, often recalling a childhood where she clipped coupons and sold homemade scrunchies to learn the value of $1. The themes are noble, but the parallels become truly fascinating when you see the direct line of influence. On an episode of her Archetypes podcast, Meghan hosted Mellody Hobson. After Hobson shared the powerful story of her upbringing and the brutal pragmatism her mother taught her, Meghan was audibly impressed, exclaiming, "I have to rethink my parenting style, because if that's what yields you, then I've really got to up my game with our kids being self-sufficient." This was a clear moment of inspiration. And after this point, Meghan's public messaging on finance and ambition seemed to crystallize around a framework that looks a lot like Hobson's. While the words are not plagiarized, the narrative architecture is nearly identical, a story of humble childhood financial lessons, leading to a strong work ethic, which in turn fuels a passionate belief in financial literacy as a tool for female empowerment. This suggests a kind of ideological mirroring. Meghan's own story is complicated. It's a story of Hollywood success, but also one of immense privilege and a connection to one of the most powerful families in the world. It is not a simple, relatable bootstraps narrative. Mellody Hobson's story, however, is exactly that. By adopting the framework of Hobson's authentic, hard-won journey, Meghan can project an image of grounded wisdom that her own biography doesn't fully support. It's a sophisticated form of brand building, but one that raises a critical question: if the story she tells about her past is a compressed exaggeration, and her business narrative is a retroactive justification of failure, is her philosophical platform a borrowed one? It points to a public persona built from the pieces of other, more authentic stories. While questions swirl around the words she speaks, even more have emerged around the moments she chooses to share, and the ones she doesn't. Nothing illustrates this better than the now infamous delivery room dance video. It was a piece of content that was meant to be a fun, humanizing glimpse into her life, but it backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The context was the 4th birthday of her daughter Lilibet. To celebrate, Meghan posted a throwback video to her Instagram. It showed her, heavily pregnant in a hospital room, dancing to the song Baby Mama in an apparent effort to induce labor. Prince Harry makes a few playful cameos, gliding in and out of the frame. In a podcast teaser, Meghan would later frame this as an example of her living an authentic life and sharing it on her own terms. The video's caption explained that both of her children were a week past their due dates, and this was a last resort. However, the public reaction was far from what she likely intended. The video was widely panned as cringy, awkward, and uncomfortable. Commentators like Megyn Kelly blasted it as deeply problematic, arguing that the moments before childbirth are private, even holy, and shouldn't be turned into an ego trip for social media content. But the cringe factor was the least of her problems. The video did something far more damaging. It poured gasoline on the fire of the wild, persistent conspiracy theories that claim Meghan used a surrogate for her pregnancies. Almost immediately, online sleuths and critics began dissecting the footage. They claimed the appearance of her baby bump in the video looked abnormal and bumpy, presenting it as proof that she was wearing a prosthetic. Whether these theories have any merit is beside the point. The real issue is that Meghan herself provided the high-quality close-up footage that her most dedicated detractors had been dreaming of. This reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of her own public image and the hostile digital environment she operates in. In her quest to control the narrative and project an image of a fun, relatable mom, she handed a weapon to her critics. It was a profound strategic self-own. She and Harry have spoken out against the global humanitarian crisis of misinformation, yet with this one post, she fueled that very crisis. The act of sharing her supposed truth only created more doubt and fed the narrative that she is performing a role. It shows a critical blind spot, a belief that if she presents something as authentic, the audience is obligated to accept it as such. She failed to anticipate how her content would be deconstructed, and in doing so, turned a birthday tribute into a firestorm of controversy. This wasn't the first time a public appearance left audiences confused or questioning what they were seeing. In fact, there's a history of on-stage mishaps that paint a picture of a public figure whose polished image is surprisingly fragile. The recent podcast slip-up wasn't a new phenomenon. It was part of a pattern that began long before she ever left the royal family. The most telling example comes from the 2018 Endeavor Fund Awards. This was her very first public speech as a royal-to-be, a high-stakes moment with the world's media watching her every move. On stage, a moment of genuine, unscripted chaos unfolded. She and her co-presenter realized, live, that they were holding two different versions of the script. What followed was an awkward, fumbling exchange as they tried to figure out whose version was correct, right in front of a packed auditorium. It was later revealed by one of the event's organizers, David Wiseman, that he was responsible for the mix-up. A last-minute change had been sent to her co-host's team, but Meghan's team had been given the older version. So, the error itself wasn't her fault. But that's not what matters. What matters is the incident itself, a rare public crack in the usually flawless royal facade. It was a glimpse of genuine confusion, a moment where the performance stopped and reality took over. These moments have continued. At a gala in New York, she was greeted not by cheers but by a heckler shouting, "Meghan, how do you feel being part of two broken families?" During a trip to Colombia, an event she was speaking at was interrupted by a heckler who began questioning the country's vice president about transgender rights, disrupting the proceedings. These unscripted moments are so jarring precisely because the rest of her public persona is so meticulously controlled. For most public figures, a gaffe or a heckler is just part of the job. But for someone who projects an image of near perfection, of total control over their narrative, these small, chaotic events become disproportionately significant. They are glimpses behind the curtain that reveal the immense effort that goes into maintaining the performance. The podcast timeline fits perfectly into this pattern. It was an unscripted, unpolished moment in a highly produced show. Like the on-stage gaffes, it was a moment where the real, unedited person slipped through the cracks of the carefully constructed persona. And it proves that the more polished the image, the more damaging the crack. The contradictions aren't just in what she says, they're in what she does, and even in what she carries. At the heart of Meghan's post-royal brand is a fundamental paradox. She simultaneously rejects the institution of the monarchy while constantly leveraging its status for her own benefit. And nothing symbolizes this paradox more clearly than a simple monogram on a travel bag. In October 2025, Meghan posted an Instagram reel recapping a trip to Washington, D.C. Eagle-eyed viewers quickly spotted her navy blue tote bag, which was emblazoned with two large, unmissable letters, ES, for Duchess of Sussex. This wasn't a one-off. She has also been seen with a black Dior bag, personalized with the initials DSSOS, another abbreviation for Duchess of Sussex. And in a widely reported incident, a gift basket she sent included a card that read, with the compliments of HRH, the Duchess of Sussex, long after she and Harry had supposedly stopped using the Her Royal Highness style. This continued use of royal branding stands in stark contrast to the very foundation of their story. They stepped down as senior working royals in 2020, we were told, to seek freedom, privacy, and a life away from the suffocating constraints of the monarchy. Yet the titles, the monograms, and the entire aesthetic of royalty remain central to their public-facing brand. Meghan herself has spoken about how meaningful the Sussex name is to her, calling it the shared name of her family, a name that means a lot to me. This isn't just hypocrisy, it's a full-blown brand identity crisis. Meghan is attempting to perform a kind of Schrodinger's royalty to be both royal and not royal at the same time, depending on which identity is more advantageous in any given moment. She wants the freedom and the moral high ground that comes with being an outsider who escaped a toxic system, but she also wants the prestige, the authority, and the undeniable marketability that comes with being an insider. This duality is fundamentally unsustainable. You cannot logically claim to be a victim of an institution while simultaneously using its branding as your primary commercial asset. It creates a permanent lens of skepticism through which all of her actions are viewed. When she tells a story, is she speaking as Meghan, the independent woman, or as the Duchess of Sussex, the brand? The answer is always confusingly both. As the foundational inconsistencies in her narrative have become more apparent, a new pattern has emerged in 2024 and 2025. It's a cycle of constant low-grade controversy that seems perfectly designed to distract from the larger, more damaging questions about her story. It's a modern PR playbook of controlled chaos. Consider the recent headlines. First, there was the heavy backlash for comparing her scaled-back, struggling Netflix deal to the wildly successful one enjoyed by Barack and Michelle Obama. Critics immediately pounced, calling the comparison nauseating and a desperate attempt to use the Obamas for clout to spin what was clearly a career setback. The story dominated the news cycle for days. Then came the trip to Paris Fashion Week. A video she posted of herself driving through the city with her feet up on the seat sparked another wave of criticism. Some felt it was tasteless and insensitive, given its proximity to the city where Princess Diana tragically lost her life. The backlash was so intense that sources claimed Prince Harry was left hurt and upset, feeling that his mother's death was being used as a stick to beat his wife with. Again, a new firestorm, a new debate, a new distraction. This was followed by confusing reports about the state of their partnership. In late 2024, sources were briefing that the couple was undergoing a professional separation to focus on individual projects. But by early 2025, a new narrative emerged. They had vowed to make their relationship a primary focus for the year, carving out more time for each other. The public was left dizzy, unsure if they were drifting apart or closer than ever. This constant churn of new, relatively low-stakes drama functions as a narrative smokescreen. Each mini-scandal, the Obama comment, the Paris video, the marriage rumors demands immediate attention. It keeps the media and the public focused on the latest thing rather than the overall pattern. While everyone is debating the optics of a car ride in Paris, they aren't connecting the dots between the word salad comment and the misremembered timeline of her children's births. It's a strategy of PR whack-a-mole. The goal isn't to win any single argument, it's to constantly change the subject, creating enough noise and confusion to prevent a coherent, critical consensus from ever forming about the core story. So after all the misremembered dates, the rewritten histories, and the public contradictions, what are we left with? We started with a single sentence, a simple mistake about dates uttered on a podcast. But that one small crack led us down a rabbit hole. It revealed a pattern of rewriting the past, from a brand that became word salad overnight to a philosophy that seems to echo another woman's voice. We saw how a desperate quest for authenticity with a delivery room video could backfire spectacularly, feeding the very misinformation the Sussexes claim to fight against. And we saw how a deep, unresolved paradox about royalty sits at the very heart of Meghan's brand, wanting to be both an insider and an outsider at the same time. The question is no longer whether she simply misspoke. The inconsistencies are too frequent, the patterns too clear. The real question is whether the entire story is a performance. Is Meghan Markle just a flawed narrator of her own life, prone to the same embellishments and misremembering as anyone else? Or is the carefully constructed story of her post-royal existence, the one she so desperately wants us to believe, beginning to crumble before our very eyes. The dates, it seems, were just the beginning.